right, so here's going to be the screencast for carbohydrates. So our essential question is, what is the difference between a monosaccharide, disaccharide, and a polysaccharide? So types of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are synthesized by photosynthesis in plants, grains, cereals, bread, sugar cane. Most of the time we think of carbs as sugars. But glucose is a major energy source. A gram of digested carbohydrate gives about 4 kilocalories of energy. You get the most bang for your buck with glucose. That's why your body is adapted to doing cellular respiration and breaking down carbs. Complex carbohydrates are what's best for your diet. There is a big difference between complex carbohydrates and the simple carbohydrates or the simple sugars. And the USDA recommends about 45 to 65% of your daily calories from carbohydrates. Now, if you're on a low-carb diet, if you're doing keto, you're going to be eating less carbs and more of the other food groups. So, basic carbohydrate types. There are monosaccharides, which mono means one or single, and then saccharide means sugar, so glucose and fructose. All that is just one molecule. And then if we take those and we start linking them together or grouping them together, we get disaccharides, which di means two. So sucrose and lactose are examples of two sugars put together. The linkage is called a glycosidic bond. And then polysaccharides are the big guys. Poly means many. So starch, glycogen, and cellulose, those are glucose molecules linked together in different ways. Some of them are chains like starch. You can be branched like glycogen. And then if you take a bunch of starch and you even put those together, then you can end up with cellulose, which is a structural component for most plants. So mono, di, poly, but they all mean sugar. Or they all mean, the saccharide all means sugar. So monosaccharides are composed of kind of your basic formula of CH2O and then to some N integer, so some multiple of this. So whether it's the integer is going to be 3 through 7, so it could be 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. You just distribute that N to everything within the parentheses. So many monosaccharides also contain some chemical modifications. You might see an amino group sticking off of it or a phosphate group sticking off of it. But they are named based on, or on the basis of their functional groups that are coming off of them. So we're going to have a basic sugar, an aldose sugar. Here's a ketose sugar. The aldose is going to have an aldehyde functional group coming off of it, and a ketose would have a ketone functional group coming off of it. But when you see the ending ose, that generally means sugar. So the number of carbon atoms in the main skeleton is how we determine the name. I am not going to make you name any of these, but I just want you to see some examples of some different types of sugars. So biological monosaccharides, glucose, like we said, is the most important sugar in the human body. Many common names, dextrose, blood sugar, all of those things all mean glucose. Its concentration in the blood is regulated by insulin and glucagon, so your body is going to be registering or maintaining that homeostasis. Glucose can also be in this cyclic form. So you have the glucose chain, and then it can form into what we commonly see it as in the cyclic, almost looking like a benzene ring for glucose with the 6 carbons bonded to each other in there. Fructose is it's the fruit sugar. That's the sugar that we tend to find in fruit. Levulose or fruit sugar, same thing. It's found in honey, corn syrup, and fruits. This is the structure for it. Very similar to glucose, just a little bit different. Galactose. Galactose is the sugar that's found in mammalian milk. And again, very similar to glucose. Here's the structure for it, whether it's in the chain or it's in the cyclic format. Ribose and deoxyribose, these are the 5-carbon sugars. Instead of a 6-carbon sugar, these are 5-carbon, and these you probably have heard of in your DNA and your RNA. These make up the backbone of your DNA and RNA. Many biological important molecules, such as DNA and RNA, they exist mainly in the cyclic form, and there's only 5 carbons with them. What makes ribose and deoxyribose different? deoxyribose is missing an oxygen that ribose has. So right here you can see that there's this extra oxygen on ribose, and it is not here on deoxyribose. So some disaccharides. Disaccharides are just linking them together. So the glucose molecules here link together and form two, and they form maltose. That's just another type of sugar. But you can see that they are linked together in here by a bond. That's malt sugar. Lactose is the sugar that we generally find in milk. It's for use as an energy source. We must hydrolyze it into glucose and galactose. So you have to be able to break that bond. And if you cannot break that bond between the glucose and the galactose, then that's what we call lactose intolerance. So you can take medication to help you break that bond, but you have to be able to break it in order to digest it. Sucrose is what we are familiar with in terms of table sugar. It's an important plant carbohydrate. It's water soluble. It's easily transported in the plant circulatory system, but sucrose cannot be synthesized by animals. So you cannot make it within your own body, but it's table sugar or cane sugar or beet sugar linked to dental caries, which is another term for cavities. So this is the sugar that we oftentimes should stay away from. And here's what sucrose looks like. So these, a glucose and a fructose linked together form a sucrose molecule. The polysaccharides are our big guys. So the first one we're going to talk about are starches. Starches are storage forms of glucose that are found in plants. So starch is just a way for plants to store some of the extra glucose that they make. And you can see it's just a whole bunch of glucose molecules bonded together. So there's amylose, amylopectin. These are all different types of starches. So the major glucose storage carbohydrate in animals is glycogen. So in your body, instead of starch, you store it as glycogen. A highly branched chain polymer, it looks like amylopectin, which is what glycogen looks like this. It's more branched, whereas starch tends to look like a straight chain. Glycogen within your body is stored in the liver and your muscle cells, and this is what you must break down first when you start working out. You must get rid of the glycogen that's going through your bloodstream, and then you can start burning fat. Cellulose is the major structural polymer in plants. Cellulose is just a whole bunch of starches grouped together. Animals lack the enzymes necessary to break down cellulose, which is why it's like roughage material for you. It's like fiber. It's going to clean out your intestinal tract, but you're not getting much nutritional benefit from it. And some organisms, some animals like ruminants, like cows, they have bacteria in their stomachs and guts that allow them to digest cellulose so they can eat grass, but it's quite a process to go through. So cellulose is, again, just going to be a whole bunch of glucose molecules linked together, but it's going to be multiples of these. So you're going to have a chain and then another chain and then another chain. And so here's kind of what I mean by the chains. They can be in straight lines or they can be branched. Here's what glycogen looks like and amylopectin. So that concludes our discussion on carbohydrates.